Welcome from the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter study group. This is February 2023. Today is the 2nd of February. This is our 64th class. We are going over the BABOK chapter 6 strategy analysis. Our mission here is to bridge the gap between industry leaders and business analysts by building partnerships with professionals, educators, and employers so that we may empower, instruct, and engage the BA community. You'll notice a map here of the world. We have people that have joined our chapter from all over the world because we offer these informational classes, as well as we provide mentorship and assistance in any way we possibly can. So if you want to be a part of our community, go ahead and join our chapter and we'll do good together. You can reach us in a variety of ways. This is our Thursday night study group from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. We do have past meeting recordings here. Cliff has provided access to these recordings via this link, and he's posted it probably in the chat by now. Also, he posts this information in a variety of areas, including Facebook and LinkedIn and other areas. We also have a couple of different sites that you can access us through, as well as areas on LinkedIn. If you have questions, you have these ways to access us. I told you this is our 64th class. We have gone through the BABOK in sample test questions previously. We've also gone through all the techniques. We also went through a section that we talked to professionals, people that you would work with as a business analyst, project managers, Agile, Scrum Master, developers, all kinds of people that you need to know what they need from you as a business analyst, and you need to know what their job is and what you can get from them. Today we're going to be going over chapter 6, strategy analysis. Today we're not going to be going over test questions. We're going to be actually going through the chapter. We found out that this is the hardest chapter, and test questions were not cutting it for getting understanding. So we're going to actually walk through the chapter today. We're going to have to go through it a little bit faster than we would like to, and we can split this into 2 classes if we decide we need to. What I did is I asked everyone to please review the chapter and bring your questions to this class so that we can answer your questions. We want you to get a deep understanding of strategy analysis so that you can pass this test. If you have a need to get additional information from a different source, you can check out Watermark Learning. They are the ones who have provided us our sample test questions up to now. They've also provided us a discount code. This is Tampa space 21. This will give you a 20% discount on all of their products. Not only do they have business analysis products, but they have a variety of other products as well. We are a volunteer-run organization. Our board is led by Cliff Gray. He's our president. You'll see him here and you'll see him over here. This is the Millennium Falcon in case you had any questions. Lori is the vice president of finance, and Caitlin and Priscilla are board members at large. My name is Thea Soren. You can reach me through LinkedIn. I'm the vice president of career and professional development. I try to keep my professional communication in LinkedIn because my email gets so full. We do need a couple of more members of our board. What we need is whatever skills you either have and you want to use, or skills that you want to develop. We have a variety of small tasks that need to be accomplished, and we would love to have you on board. It also looks really good on your resume to be a board member of a chapter. To legitimize our study group today, you have to have people that have passed the CBAP attending the study group to provide mentorship. Today we have Bob Churchill. He has passed his CBAP as well as passed a whole bunch of other things. He also has an awesome website that has really high value items in it. I encourage you to check it out. Not only is it about business analysis, but about a variety of other things that a business analyst would be interested to learn. You can also reach him at bob@rpchurchill.com if you have any questions. He is wonderful to engage in. Yulia often joins us. I'm surprised.
I'm here.
You are here. I was about to say, I don't see
Sorry,
her.
everybody wants piece of me, so I just joined 2 minutes ago, and before I had a meeting too. So
Okay,
Sorry.
well, Julia had passed her CBAP September 2nd, which is not very long ago. And so she's able to tell us from current memory of what is actually on the CBAP as we move into it. So let me minimize this display here and go to something else. Okay. I want you to think about what, oh, I'm sorry, this is my profile on LinkedIn. If you need to find me, this is what it should look like. I did a search for business analysts in jobs in LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great way to find people for jobs because it literally will search for through your profile to see if you have this skill or this ability. Then you go into the job portal and you can find a whole list of jobs. I did the search for business analysis. We have 98,816 results. That's how many positions mention business analysis in them. But if you look at CBAP, you have 9,000 results. If you have your CBAP certification, you put yourself in a very small percentage of business analysts. You'll stand out just because you have your CBAP certification. Some companies do not understand what a CBAP actually is, but they do understand that you've invested time and effort into trying to better yourself in your profession, and they respect that. Other companies, on the other hand, do understand what a CBAP is. Some of them will pay for your CBAP training. Some of them will pay for your application. And some of them have memberships as companies to the IIBA. So check that out. In the IIBA's website, if you're a member, you'll see your name up here whenever you sign in. You can look at some things that you would be interested in regarding the certification exam, 5 things you need to know before writing to it. And so it goes through that, but I wanted to show you this one. The Certified Business Analysis Professional, now available online. You can take the test online, but if you scroll right down here, test your knowledge. Here's sample test questions and exam blueprint. So they have some sample test questions you can go to from them. And here's details to prepare on exam day. Between these two pages within the IIBA, it tells information on how to apply, what you need to have to prepare to apply, and a couple of other important things.
Can I add something about exam sample questions? I
Sure.
would recommend you to use it at the last moment because there are like only 10 questions or something. So when I already finished my preparation, I checked out those questions to check how I'm doing.
Very good.
So don't do them right away.
Okay.
That's it. All questions.
All right. There's not a whole lot of questions, but they're
like 10
from the IIBA. Okay. Whenever you look at the post from Cliff, whenever he puts out, we're having this study group, he puts out a link. Here is where you go in the link. You go to IIBA Tampa Bay BABOK study group. Here's a recording of all of the classes that we have had that we didn't have technical difficulties on. It also has a download of the BABOK guide right here. So if you don't have a copy at the moment and you're going to be joining the IIBA, go ahead and look at that. And let's start with that now. So we talked about chapter 6. Let me pull this back over. And well, I thought I had an index over here to the left, but I don't see it. So let me go this way. So strategy. Okay, I asked y'all to bring your questions regarding strategy analysis chapter to our, I'm going to take myself off of video because that's crazy. Let me see if I can do that. Stop video. Okay, does anyone have any questions about the first page? If not, I'll just go over the first page. Okay, then let me ask a question a different way. Does anyone have any questions about the chapter? Did you bring questions? Because I may be able to answer that before we get to that section.
I mean,
Okay,
if everybody is quiet, I think it's cool to look at figure 601, just the next page, and just talk about it.
okay. Why don't you start, Julia?
I propose.
Is that all you want to do is just propose we talk about it?
You just volunteered, hon.
No. Well, okay. Tell me what you think this means and we'll go from there. So we have the potential.
Okay, yeah, we
solution
have
and the
potential
actual
value
solution.
and actual value. We start with potential value, right?
Okay.
So strategy analysis happens at the very early stage of potential value, and we analyze need and solution scope of whatever we are trying to do, correct?
Yes.
And if I'm just looking at the graph and explaining what I'm seeing, and if we did a good job with it and everybody is agree, then we can move to the second stage where we do chapter 7, requirements analysis and design definition, right? And then we already do our requirements and design. Yes, somebody said something.
Yeah, Julia, I had a question actually. So in this particular diagram, the arrow goes both ways, potential to actual and actual to potential. So I am not sure why it should go from actual to potential.
Good point.
It goes from potential to actual. Time goes from left to right. So you do strategy, which is how you're going to approach the problem. Requirements analysis and design is what are the specifics of this problem, and solution evaluation is how are we actually going to solve the problem. However, and that's the way the BABOK itself is structured in the main knowledge area. So that's very solid. However, if you look at the diagram on the next page, figure 601, they have two of them apparently. Page 102, one more page, that one. So the four things you're doing, there are inputs and outputs, but the four things you're doing is figure out what's going on now, figure out where you're trying to get, figure out what the risks are, and figure out how you're gonna do it. That isn't really needs and scope. So I think the BABOK could be clarified here. If you look at this diagram here, analyze current state to find future state, assess risk and define change strategy, that'll give you a really better understanding of what I think this chapter is about. It's more in keeping with the way I think about how to do all this in my drawing and so on. And that's just my opinion.
I have a question. This brings up a good point. And it's kind of back to the same question about the arrows going from one side to the other. And I think, you know, if we follow it left to right, it starts with need and solution scope, but the inputs to this process include things that are actually in what I would consider requirements analysis and design definition. So if we go back to that diagram that, we see that 5.3 designs prioritized and 5.3 requirements prioritized actually are inputs to this process that is actually supposed to be before we get into, if we're going strictly linearly, in the next phase of the process. So I'm curious, my feeling about all of these inputs and outputs on all of the input and output diagrams is they're not necessarily linear. They're
That is exactly
oftentimes
true.
cyclical, and that's why they're mapped this way.
You are extremely correct. Let me go back to this one.
But
Whenever
I
you-
think, sorry to interrupt, but I think requirement analysis and design is the seventh part, but the prioritized requirements happen in the fifth part, which is the requirement lifecycle management. So that comes before strategy analysis.
Right. So let me talk about strategy analysis. Whenever you have a project, and it says in the very beginning of the BABOK, this is not a linear process.
Yeah.
Whenever you have any project, you start with an idea of what the need is, and you go into discovery, and you try to figure out what's causing the problem, what can be done for the solutions, who needs to be involved in the solutions, who needs to be contributing information to it. And as you work your way through the project, you're going to get new information that's going to make you have to go back and check are we doing the right solution? With this new information, we have to reevaluate. We found a whole new person to talk to, a whole new department, a whole new region that we need to talk to. So you have to kind of go through this in a cycle of reevaluating with every new piece of information. And you're right, requirements analysis and design does come in the BABOK before this, but this is a thing that you have to figure out what is the next need, regardless of where in the book it comes. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
that's why this goes both ways, because you have to reevaluate periodically. You have to decide, is this truly the root cause that you're trying to solve, or is it a symptom? Yes, Bob.
Can I have the screen for a second?
You may have the screen.
Actually, for that figure, the task may be performed in any order, and
Yes.
they also can be performed in the same time.
I agree.
All right, can everyone see that?
Mhm.
We can, thank
All
you.
right, so the way I think about it is to find the problem, figure out what's going on now, figure out what the raw material of the solution and the problem is going to be, figure out what the requirements are. So here's your as is, the conceptual model. Here's your abstract to be, which is your requirements. The design is a concrete to be, and the actual to is, is when you build it, and how you do the implementation and get from here to there is strategy analysis. Then obviously test happens and acceptance, but the main thing you want to understand is understanding within each one of these phases is iterative, and you also iterate back and forth between phases. One of the biggest examples is test and implementation. You're constantly going back and forth between those. But say there is no to be or as is state. So you're building a solution from scratch and not changing something that already exists. So you're really doing the conceptual modeling embedded in the design. And conceptual modeling also happens when you're thinking about new technologies you may bring to bear that are giving you new opportunities. Those things can all happen at any time. So really I wish the BABOK was a little bit different. All the information is there. It's really quite good in many ways. It's just you have to accept there's a certain amount of nebulousness in the process.
Right. Thank you,
And
Can
Bob.
I, add something from the book I'm reading right now? So it says, strategy analysis provides context to requirements analysis and design definition for a given change. Strategy analysis should be performed as a business need is identified. This allows stakeholders to make the determination of whether to address that need or not. Strategy analysis is ongoing activity that assesses any changes in that need and its context, or any new information that may indicate that an adjustment to the change strategy may be required. That's why we have that arrow with two arrowheads, right? So for example, we already have a need, we identified a scope which makes sense. We need to know our boundaries and understand where to stop. And then let's say in the requirements analysis and definition area, new information emerge. So ideally we should come back and we reevaluate strategy analysis. So this is how at this moment I would read this graph. What is it, figure?
This is 601.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I guess
that makes perfect sense, Julia. Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
thanks, Julia, Rob, and Thea. Yeah, that does answer my question.
Yeah, but honestly, when I've been reading this book several times, and each time I read, each time I understand differently.
Yeah.
No joke.
Yeah, well, we build on our previous understanding every time we read it, so it continues to grow. So let's go on to 6.1. I'm going to skip right here. Okay, let me tell you, this is 601 strategy analysis input output diagram. These are all the inputs for all the tasks with all the outputs. This makes me crazy, guys, because I want to see only this inputs for one task and only the outputs for that one task to try to comprehend it. This just confuses me. So I'm going to go on to 6.1. It's called Analyze Current State. This is the task, and let's look at that diagram. So the input to this are the needs, and 4.3, the elicitation results confirmed. The task is Analyze Current State. So you take these two things, you can do this task. The output is current state description and business requirements. And from this one, you can go to 6.2. From this one, you got these tasks that are using this input. And notice these tasks are previous to 6.1. Here's 3.3, and then here's some that are after. 6.3, 6.4, 6.2, 7.3, 7.6, 8.4, and 8.5. The guidelines and tools, you need to know these as guidelines and tools because the test questions will refer to them as what are the guidelines? Is this a guideline? You know, that kind of thing. So the business analysis approach, the enterprise limitation, there's paragraphs within this chapter that and explain what each one of these things are. So you need to know that these are guidelines and tools that go into this task. So you got your inputs, your guidelines and tools feeding into the tasks. Any questions on this?
There are some errata for chapter 6, and some of them are significant. So I will post again the link to the BABOK errata, which includes one for the inputs, one for define future state input diagram. Anyway, I'll put the link out there without going into it. You can
Okay,
all
so
look this up on your own and correct your
right.
BABOK accordingly.
So for those of you who were not here last week, the errata is the corrections that were submitted and approved to this document after it was published. So if you have a published version, if you have one of these sitting in front of you, the errata needs to be reviewed and update this so that whenever you actually go through it for the test, you have the correct answers. Thank you for that, Jim. Okay, so we know what the business need is. We know that there's 4 different ways to identify the different levels of the enterprise. Whenever you talk about strategic goals, this is whenever a company says, we want to provide the best healthcare in the region, for a hospital or something like that. That's what would be a strategic goal. Typically, it should have a quantifiable ability, but that would make it a requirement. Bottom up, a problem with the current state of a process, function, or system. Middle management, you understand that, and the external drivers like customer demand. I worked for Bausch & Lomb Sports Optics, or Bushnell Sports Optics. They were together at the time. We had a customer demand for a certain kind of binocular for people that looked at birds. There's a ornithology, is that the right word?
Ornithology, yeah.
Thank you. But they had a special thing, and it was associated with Birds Unlimited. And I mean, that's an external driver of a thing that needed to be done because they were responding to a customer demand or a business competition. They were trying to beat somebody else to the marketplace for this. Okay, so let's go on.
Can I raise a question which
Yes.
Before super confused me, and until now it's still like a little bit blurry for me. So we have guidelines and tools in general in each knowledge area, in each task, right? And we have techniques. Do you know the difference between guideline and tools and techniques? I can tell you from my notes how they define guidelines and tools and how they define techniques, and maybe let's talk about it. To me,
Sure.
it's kind of, they intertwine in a way. So guidelines and tools is list of resources needed to transform input into output.
And
Okay.
sometimes those guidelines and tools, I've noticed, are an output of another process.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example of that, Jim?
Oh, I thought you'd ask that. Doesn't come to mind yet.
Bob has his hand up.
Hold on, let me continue. Hold on. Let's
Go ahead,
then
Julia.
break it down. Guideline, right? Guideline is instruction or description on why or how to undertake a task. Tool, something used to undertake a task. Technique, used to perform a task.
Well, I would say this. Here's what jumps out to me. Guidelines and tools are things. They're the results of things you've done. They're rules, they're definitions, they're numbers, they're business rules, laws, that kind of thing, limits, edge cases. But techniques are verbs. They're things you actually do. They're processes that you undertake. And so many of those processes, those techniques may yield these guidelines and tools. So the techniques are the work, and the guidelines and tools are kind of finished product or
The how.
result.
It's the
That's
how.
a good
are you
way to
gonna get it?
remember it. Yeah, because I would do back to your question, Thea. I mean, I think solution limitation is an output of another process. Solution performance measures is another output of another process.
Yes, solution performance measures comes from chapter 3, from first
Mhm.
knowledge area.
I love these sessions because I learned so much. I never would have seen that if we hadn't talked about it.
The contribution of people contributing to these conversations is what makes these sessions good. Your observations, the way your individual mind works, contributing to the collective of our conversation is what makes it valuable. So those of you who aren't contributing, please contribute. We're not scary, at least I'm not. Okay, so let's go on. There's a whole section for guidelines and tools, 6.1.5. I want to scroll down here. Here's a list of guidelines and tools, and my video is going crazy again, so I'm going to shut it off. It's almost entertaining, except it's kind of, alternate reality thing. Okay, so guidelines and tools, here's a description of each of these. Some of these are literally tools used to understand the current state and challenging of existing solutions. And then whenever you get into techniques, this is the what and this is the how. Did anyone have any questions about techniques that are listed here? There's only about 20 of them. And let me say that when we were writing the techniques chapter, we knew that not everyone would use every single technique. You're going to have a handful of techniques that you're comfortable with that are useful for your particular needs in your particular organization. But you need to understand what the rest of them are, what they're good for, and what their limitations are whenever you take the test. So are there any of these that y'all have any questions about?
I think overall, one thing I have this study notes thing. It's this massive spreadsheet with multiple tabs of different things that I'm memorizing. And this is one that I'm really struggling with, is associating them, all of the techniques with all of the tasks. And one thing I started looking at was patterns. Is there a guide for sort of affinitizing the techniques to say, these are this kind of technique, rather than just alphabetizing them, but saying there's kind of a genre of techniques that's about analyzing business capabilities, and they include benchmarking and business capability analysis and business model canvas, etc.
There is, but it's not here. It's I would refer you to Scott Amber, and he has a textbook called Agile Modeling.
Okay.
And in that textbook, I can put it into the chat. In that textbook, he defines pretty much every one of these and what they're used for, how to use them, when not to use them, and pros and cons.
That's probably a great reference. Thank you for that. I will check into it also. I also did a blog post, and it's been in a couple of presentations where I took all 50 techniques and talked about whether they're part of the engagement, which is the process of doing business analysis through a project, whether they're part of figuring out the solution, which is the actual nuts and bolts of the problem you're trying to solve, or whether they're germane to both. So that may help. I will also say that when I studied for this, I similarly made a spreadsheet and found out there were a couple of irregularities of what's in the BABOK, a couple things that aren't quite consistent, and I sent those to the IIBA, and they were added as errata at that time.
Thank you for your inputs. Other than that, I would say just go to the technique underneath the task and just associate this one is for this task because it contributes this type of thing to the task. I've had to do it that way. It's the why is it associated with this task? What is it this task needs from this technique, and when would it be useful? And then I go through a mental exercise of walking through the task using each of these techniques just to get it associated with for myself.
In my case, I just was reading techniques. I did not memorize anything at all. I was just reading techniques, and I was trying to understand at high level why it is used, and that's it. And it helped me to pass the test.
Very good.
You don't need to memorize it please, no.
Right. You don't have to associate it with each one, but it is good to know the main techniques that you would use for it in case there's questions on that.
Yeah, I'm the same way, Yulia. I'm a why. I think a lot of us are why thinkers, and it's much easier to unpack it if we know the why on it. And so if I started trying to affinitize them by the why, and that may be I may continue to pursue that.
I
on my
think that's
own.
probably a good idea, Jim. And I'm interested to read your spreadsheets after you finish getting everything put together. Okay, any questions on the stakeholders for 6.1? Why some of these would be involved, or why, or objections?
This is all of the
Implementation subject matter
stakeholders,
expert.
yes?
This is all the stakeholders for 6.1. And it identifies what each of their roles are in 6.1 as well, because stakeholders are going to have different roles based on the task.
So it's all 10 stakeholders that are mentioned in the BABOK are associated with this one. I think one of the things that is kind of confusing on the study guide or the test is sometimes they say all stakeholders and sometimes they say any stakeholder. And I'm not sure sometimes what they mean by all versus any. And maybe if we come upon some of those in the test, we might be able to discern what that means.
Does
anyone on the team? Yeah, does anyone know the difference? Because that is really confusing, I think.
I would say that all and any are just interchangeable.
Yeah.
I mean, because literally they only have these 10, and you know very well that there are other stakeholders out there that don't have one of these titles.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, outputs for 6.1 is current state description, which is the enterprise's scope, capabilities, resources, performance, culture, dependencies, infrastructure, external influences, and significant relationships between these elements. And then the business requirements, which is, this is the part we have to document and be able to explain to every single stakeholder in their own language. Okay, let's go to 6.2. The purpose of defining future state is to determine the set of necessary conditions to meet the business need. I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if I can. I drew a picture. Can you see my picture? It's 2 islands. You're on one island, you want to get to the other island. That's your current state, your future state. What is it going to take to get you there? Define future state is, what is the future state you need? Let's talk about moving from one warehouse to another warehouse. The warehouse that we are currently in, we know what it is. The future state is, we need to have a PBX, we need to have loading docks, we need to have whatever. That's future state. Until you have that defined, it's like going on a trip and not knowing your destination. You've got to know your destination to go on a trip successfully. So, any questions about 6.2? It has a very nice list of possible topics that might be in your future state. I would not assume that in the real world you're really going to limit it to this, but these are more like suggestions for consideration. These in this combination may trigger the idea that there's something else. And I would always ask your SMEs, what does it look like? What does success look like? What problems will be solved when we get there? You're not always going to be able to get everything into your future state, but that's a really good way to get them to brainstorm through it. Visual models are really effective whenever you're talking about future state, because people think in pictures. Almost half of the people think in pictures, according to recent studies. If you can give them pictures, diagrams, flows, something that will help them understand, they're going to learn it faster, they're going to comprehend it more deeply, and they're going to be able to interact with it more quickly. So the business requirements will be the problems, opportunities, or constraints that the future state will address, and that's your input. Here's define your future state, which is your task. Your outputs are going to be your business objectives, future state description, and potential value. Into future state, also, you've got your guidelines and tools, which is your constraint, current state description, metrics, and key performance indicators, which we call KPIs, and strategy, organizational strategy. Any questions about this part of this document? Okay, let's talk about what the outputs are going to impact. This is one of those super impactful ones. You probably will not see another diagram in here that have so many things that are impacted. Here's things from chapter 4 through chapter 8. Business objectives. Let me talk about business objectives for a minute. And this is outside the BABOK, but I want you to be sure you understand this. As a business analyst, you are given business objectives for a project. Very frequently, they decide what the project is before we ever get involved. But they tell you this is what we want to achieve. I encourage you to organize your requirements based on those business objectives. Organize your features in Rally or your, I forgot what it is in Jira, epics in Jira based on those business objectives. Put your user stories in, organized that way. Put your tests based on your user stories. And that way, when they say, did we meet this business objective? You can say, here is your lineage. You got traceability through all of your things. You don't have to try to figure it out. Also, please work with your project manager to create the schedule based upon those elements in either Jira or Rally, whatever you choose. And that way, whenever they say, is this going to be done by this date? You don't have to scramble to try to figure out what makes that thing up because they use different terms. Use the same terms in your project schedule as well as your business objectives and through Rally or Jira or whatever you use, TFS, whatever. And then let's talk about future state description. Your business objectives should help you determine your future state description. You've got all this, don't forget to assess risks. And then you've got your potential value. What's it going to give you? These things are super important whenever you're talking to executives because they sometimes are very focused on one or two of the business objectives. And if you have all of this lined out and documented well, it's easy to talk to them about it. Any questions? Okay, let's move on. You got your elements. Goals are longer term, ongoing quantitative statements of a state or condition. The organization is able to establish and maintain. So you got your list of goals here. They identify what high-level goals are, and high-level goals should be refined to the point where you can measure them, where you can say, did we achieve it? Did we achieve that goal or not? It's not a judgmental thing. It's not relative. It's yes or no. I used an example earlier of the hospital says we want to provide the best healthcare in the region. You can't measure that unless you have some kind of scale that you can measure yourself against other people. This particular thing I have highlighted, high revenue customers in the 30 to 40 age bracket by 30% within 6 months. You can measure that. You can say, yes, we achieved success. Whenever you have goals, here's the way to do it. If the acronym is SMART. You probably heard this in every project management seminar you've ever been in. Yulia, was it on the test? On your test, realizing there's like 4 different versions of the test. Was it on your test that they wanted to know what the acronym meant?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. I've had several people tell me that they had a list of things that the acronym could mean, and you needed to know what it was. So,
but I remember we had it in watermark a lot, but on the actual exam, I don't think I had that question. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, we should know what it means in general.
Yeah, in general. Relevant is the one that I always think, is it relevant or some other word? So memorize it for that. Okay. Constraints. Constraints are important. I have no doubt that there's going to be test questions about constraints because they want to know what kind of constraints you could have for this particular task. So going through and thinking of what kind of technology constraints could there be? What kind of infrastructure constraints could there be? And if there's a word in here that you're not familiar with, ask some people. And you're going to discover that infrastructure, the meaning of the infrastructure in one company may not be the same meaning in a different company. So ask enough people where you can get a good understanding of what different people think it means so that you can know how it's really being used. Organizational structure and culture. I think this is one of the guidelines and tools for this one. This is important. Whenever you work with an organization and you say, okay, we want to achieve this lofty goal, and you look at the people that are in the organization and you go, they do not have the educational level, they do not have the bandwidth, they do not have the culture, they don't trust each other, whatever it is, you've got to be able to talk about that. You can't say we're going to blindly move ahead with this thing and then they can't adopt it, they can't work with it. They don't have enough people to do it, whatever. You have to be able to consider those things as you're talking about feasibility of the project. Capabilities and processes, technology and infrastructure policies. Does anyone have a question on these? Okay, moving on. Business architecture. If you're not in software development, this is going to be I'm sorry, I'm getting two different things mixed up. Business architecture is the architecture of the business, not the architecture of the systems.
Application. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I've been in IT too long. Everything looks like business architecture to me because I'm looking at the business through the architecture. Okay.
Well, it's like Thea's friend told us a few weeks ago, a few months ago, you're thinking at the same time on 3 levels in parallel. The business, the application, and the actual implementation. And the application and implementation may be an IT system, usually is for most of us, but isn't always. And so you need to be aware that you're thinking and communicating about and on all 3 of those levels, and you need to be aware of that trichotomy, so to speak, as you go along. Understanding that was an answer I looked for a long time and greatly clarified my thinking.
Bob, do you have that book that I loaned you, gave you, whatever?
Yes.
If you have been a business analyst for a while, you might be interested to look up this book. It is about business architecture, and I did not even understand what that term meant until I got a hold of this book, and it kind of a whole new world was open to me, and it was very useful. What's it called? Strategy to Reality. That's it. The mother of business architecture wrote that book, and Wendy Curran. So if you're interested, if you have kind of mastered a business analysis or have a lot of experience and you're ready to look for the next thing, consider just scanning through this book. Okay, internal assets. We know that this means assets within the organization, identifying assumptions. Guys, this will bite you. If in the real world, if you see a business case and they have made assumptions, it is up to you to say, how do we know this is true? What do you mean by this term? Who has validated this? Have we considered other options? So you have to go through the assumptions. And you know, assumptions are beliefs that aren't spoken. So you have to kind of think outside of the box. And it's really a whole lot easier for some weird reason if you're new to the organization, because they have their own language, they have their own culture, they have their own beliefs. You coming in from the outside is a benefit and an asset to be able to look at assumptions and go, help me understand why you do it this way. Help me understand what that word means. I think you've got two. I went to a company one time, they had 3 different departments that sold warranties, and they had 3 different processes, and I brought them all together and I said, let's organize it and use the same process. They all meant totally different things by the word warranty. Totally. We disbanded the meeting after 20 minutes. But the idea that they had the assumption that they all sold warranties, it was all the same, it didn't work. Okay, potential value. So potential value of the project. You have a lot of different categories here. You got to look at potential value based on the future state and what it could bring to the organization. And this is immediate value as well as long-term value. It is value to the bottom line as well as value to the culture, value to the processes, value to how the organization will be seen by marketing, for marketing purposes, etc.
Let me give you one example of that you may well all know about.
All right.
That is a company, ultimately you're always doing it based on money, but you want to make sure you do it at the right level. Just doing a short-term calculation by saying, okay, the amount we pay in damages would be less than the cost of fixing the problem that leads to the damages might not be a good idea, because there's a whole lot of loss of goodwill and reputation and other things that can be associated with that. Think of the Fort Pinto in a little welded piece of metal they omitted, and all the problems that caused. It was a cynical short-term calculation that turned out to be wrong, because there are follow-on effects they could not consider. So you really have to think of the overall systemic cost.
I agree. Okay. We are guidelines and tools. There's only 3: current state description, metrics and key performance indicators, and organizational strategy. Sometimes if you're brand new to the company, this is going to be hard for you to grasp. You have to ask people's opinions. Sometimes it's actually documented, but not very rarely. That's a challenge. And then techniques. How many techniques do we have here? 4, 8, about 25 techniques. Does anyone have a question on any of these techniques? Okay, moving on. And the stakeholders, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All the stakeholders are listed here. Their roles in this are important though. Yulia has shown us over and over that the role of that stakeholder in this task is different than the role of that stakeholder in another task. So be aware of what they're supposed to do in this task.
I just wanted to add on here. There's a worksheet that has been shared by Yulia on the material, and that's a very good worksheet. It has all the stakeholders mentioned according to the task, and there are other things also that are just, you know, a very quick view to see who is involved in which task, which activity maps to which technique, and which guidelines, how many times the guidelines has been used, and so on. So maybe everybody can take a look at that and be benefited by that.
Thank you. Thank you. And Yulia did a fantastic job on that spreadsheet. She
Absolutely.
created it for her own use, but then she was great enough to share it with us. Okay, that is all of the information on just the first two of the four in this chapter, and we are at the end of our time. I need to take a vote of those of you who are here. Do you want to go over the other two next week, or do you want to go on to the next chapter? If you want to go on to the next chapter, raise your hand. Better yet, everybody put in your vote in the chat. Do you want to go into the next chapter, or do you want to continue on chapter 6 and try to do a deeper dive? Okay, I've got next chapter, which would be chapter 7. All right. I've got 2 chapter 6s. 3. I want everybody's vote. Everybody counts here.
Yeah, deeper dive is chapter 6. Okay.
Okay.
Looks like chapter 6 is winning.
Looks like chapter 6
5,
is winning.
4. It's still tight.
Okay.
6, 4.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I didn't want to vote, Thea. I shouldn't count.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to finish chapter 6 next week, and then we'll go on to chapter 7. But your contribution to this conversation is important. I need you to look through chapter 6 and see if you have any questions for 6.3 and 6.4 so that we can get your questions answered next week. If you need to contact me between now and then, LinkedIn is the way to do it. If you're looking for positions, let me know and I'll be glad to try to help you. I can work on your resume. I can help connect you to people in the company that you want to go to. And I have recruiters calling me every single day looking for you. If you're an entry level, I may not have so many jobs for you, but I'm getting jobs every day, guys. So let me help you. Contact me through LinkedIn and I'll do the best I can. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for all you do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're very
Yeah,
welcome.
to add on that, Thea, sorry,
Yes,
I
ahead.
just wanted to, because I, as you saw, I'm doing the stuff while we're doing this meeting. There are quite a few people I'm connected to on LinkedIn, but aren't part of our group, the IIBA group in LinkedIn. You guys all have invitations. Just accept it, and then you'll get meeting notices and all kinds of other stuff when we do that. It's up to you, but just to let you know, it's there.
So we have a LinkedIn group that will provide information about the activities of the chapter and the study group and the lunch and learns and the other things that we do. You may not know this. We are one of the very few chapters that don't charge for these classes. We don't charge for anything. We're doing this because we want to help our community. We want to help the people that are doing the work that are helping people make lives better. So if you want to be a part of us, be a part of us. If you want to just visit occasionally, you're welcome to. If you want to help us make the world better, volunteer to do something for the board and we can put you to work. If you have ever incorporated in the state of Florida, we would like to talk to you. This is a fun thing to do. Okay. Any other questions? Any comments?
I want to add one more thing actually.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Thea, so I have attended a couple of other sessions on the other chapters also, and I won't name the chapters, but they were not as interactive as I find it here. So this is a great meeting here that we all meet here and everybody puts in their, thought processes. It helps.
Good. Well, you know, we all have this unique experience and background and the way our brain works. And we look at something and we see it totally different than anyone else. And then we speak up and we enrich their understanding. So thank you so much for saying that. We want to make this the very best it can be. And if anyone has any suggestions on ways we can be better, let me know. I don't mind changing and testing it, and we'll do that agile thing, you know. We'll fail fast if it's going to fail, and if it's not going to fail, it'll succeed. It will be good. Okay, guys, y'all have a fantabulous week, and I will see you here next week. We will go over 6.3 and 6.4. I need you to read through it and see if you have any questions. If you have questions about the techniques or anything else, let me know next week, okay? Bye. Have a good week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.